She was not supposed to be here. That is the single most important sentence you will read today. Write it down. Tattoo it on your brain. Because the entire global machinery of professional tennis, the executives, the agents, the media empires, the billion-dollar sponsors, the veteran players, every single one of them built their careers, their contracts, and their carefully constructed futures on one foundational assumption: that a 20-year-old girl from the Philippines would never, ever make it to this stage. They were wrong. They were catastrophically, historically, irreversibly wrong. And now they are paying for it in front of the entire world. Let's set the scene, because you need to fully understand the magnitude of what has just happened in Miami. The Miami Open is not just a tennis tournament. It is the crown jewel of the American hardcourt season. It is where the sports elite come to assert dominance, where rankings are defended, where legacies are carved, and where the tennis establishment quietly decides who belongs at the very top. The courts are pristine. The sponsorship banners are flawless. The corporate suites are filled with powerful people who believe they control the narrative of this sport entirely. They do not control this narrative anymore. Because Alexandra Eala, the 31st seed, the Filipino prodigy trained in the ruthless fires of the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, has just torn that narrative apart with her bare hands. She walked into the semi-final under the suffocating, scalding, merciless Miami sun against one of the most conditioned and battle-hardened veterans on the entire WTA Tour, and she did not just win. She systematically, surgically, and completely dismantled everything her opponent brought to that court. The heat was supposed to break her. The crowd was supposed to intimidate her. The experience gap was supposed to swallow her whole. Instead, Eala stood on that baseline like she had been born for that exact moment, balanced, ice-cold, and absolutely locked in. Her heart rate, by every visible measure, was steady. Her footwork was precise. Her topspin ground strokes were landing with the kind of weighted, heavy, venomous pace that made her opponent visibly flinch on the other side of the net. Every time, the veteran tried to redirect the match, tried to find a weakness, tried to exploit the pressure of the moment. Eala closed the door. Again, and again, and again. When the final ball landed, the silence from the corporate boxes was deafening. The commentators on national television were stuttering, sweating on camera, searching desperately for words that could explain how a 20-year-old from Southeast Asia had just turned a Miami semi-final into a one-sided execution of everything the establishment held dear. There were no words. There is no framework in the old tennis vocabulary for what Alexandra Eala is doing right now. They simply were not prepared for her. And that is precisely where the panic begins, because the semifinal was not the main event. The semifinal was the preview, the violent, thunderous warning signal that the world was given 24 hours before the actual earthquake arrives. The establishment had time to breathe, to regroup, to reach into their reserve and deploy their most trusted weapon. They chose Karolína Muchová, the 13th seed, an experienced European veteran of the highest order. Muchova is not a soft opponent. She is tactical, she is versatile, she is a fighter who has proven time and time again that she thrives in high-pressure finals. The executives handed her the racket, pointed toward the court, and essentially told her, "You are the last line of defense. Stop this. Stop her, before everything we have built collapses." That is an enormous weight to carry into a final. And right now, Karolína Muchová is sitting in her hotel room in Miami. And no matter how much she tries to rest, no matter how many tactical videos she studies, no matter how deep she reaches into her experience, and her technical arsenal she cannot escape. The image that is burned into the back of her eyelids, she keeps seeing the top spin. Heavy, shoulder high, relentless, physically punishing top spin that does not just beat you, it breaks you down, shot by shot, until your legs are concrete, your lungs are burning, and your will to fight has been slowly and systematically dissolved. This is not a random playing style. This is not instinct. This is the direct product of the Rafa Nadal Academy, the most ruthless, most scientifically precise, most physically demanding training system that the sport of tennis has ever produced. Rafael Nadal himself has spoken publicly about Eala. He has claimed her as a product of his philosophy, his methods, his obsessive pursuit of physical and mental perfection. Let that land for a moment. The greatest clay court warrior in the history of the sport, a man who built his legacy on an almost supernatural ability to physically and psychologically grind his opponents into dust, looked at Alexandra Eala and said, "She is mine. She carries what I built." How does Karolína Muchová prepare to face that? How does anyone? You cannot. That is the answer. You cannot fully prepare for a player who does not experience pressure the way normal players do. Most athletes, when they step into the biggest moment of their career, a final, a title match, a defining performance on the world stage, feel the gravity of the situation. Their chest tightens. Their footwork gets heavier. Their decision-making slows by half a second. Half a second is everything at this level. Alexandra Eala steps into that final tomorrow and does not see gravity. She sees a birthright. That is the defining psychological difference that separates her from every other player the establishment has tried to stop her with. She was not just trained physically at the Nadal Academy. She was trained to approach the biggest moments in professional tennis, the way Rafa approached Wimbledon, Roland Garros, and every other cathedral of the sport, with an almost terrifying sense of inevitability. She belongs here. She has always belonged here. And no amount of ranking numbers, no amount of experience gaps, no amount of institutional bias from the corporate establishment will convince her otherwise. Muchova will feel pressure tomorrow. Eala will feel purpose. That is not a small distinction. That is the entire match, decided before the first ball is struck. And then there is the weapon that no algorithm, no scouting report, and no executive strategy session could have possibly calculated: the crowd. When Alexandra Eala walks out of that tunnel and onto the Hard Rock Stadium court tomorrow, she will not be walking out alone. She will be walking out with the full force of one of the most passionately unified fan bases the sport has ever seen. The Filipino diaspora in Florida and across the entire United States has been completely, unstoppably mobilized. This is not a fan group. This is not a section of supporters with painted flags waving politely from the upper deck. This is a cultural declaration. This is an entire people watching one of their own stand on the largest stage in the sport and refuse to be turned away. The Hard Rock Stadium will not sound like a tennis match tomorrow. It will sound like Manila. It will sound like every Filipino household in America gathered in one place, channeling every ounce of hope, pride, passion, and defiant belief into the atmosphere of that arena. The decibels will shatter records before the umpire calls time. The noise will hit Karolína Muchová the moment she steps onto the court, and she will feel in her bones, in her chest, that she is playing an away game in the most hostile, passionate, overwhelming environment on the planet. Eala will feed on every single sound wave. Muchova will have to fight through it. This brings us to the larger truth that no mainstream tennis outlet is willing to say out loud. So it falls to the rest of us to say it clearly. What is happening in Miami is not just a sporting event. It is a seismic cultural shift that the sports establishment has been trying to delay, redirect, and suppress for years. The WTA, the corporate sponsors, the media empires, they spent hundreds of millions of dollars building and marketing a particular vision of what women's tennis looks like, who its stars are, and who gets to hold the trophies at the end of the season. The magazine covers were pre-assigned. The sponsorship deals were pre-written. The narrative was locked and loaded. Alexandra Eala was not in that narrative. She was never supposed to be. She was a 31st seed. She was young. She was from a country that the establishment had never considered a source of tennis superpowers. She trained in Mallorca, not in the academies and programs the media had anointed as the pipeline to greatness. She was supposed to be a footnote, a promising talent who would develop quietly, lose a few rounds in the big tournaments, and bide her time at the margins of the conversation for several more years. Instead, she is in the final of the Miami Open, at 20 years old, and the entire establishment is scrambling. Nike, Head, Rolex, the brands that carefully constructed their marketing portfolios around their hand-selected stars, are watching this unfold with a cold sweat running down their executive spines. Because if Alexandra Eala lifts that trophy tomorrow, the carefully manufactured hierarchy of women's tennis does not just bend, it shatters. The sponsorship money will follow the story, and the story will follow Eala. The magazine covers will have to change. The media will have to recalibrate. The entire carefully constructed infrastructure of who tennis decides to celebrate will be forced to confront a new, inescapable reality. The game has changed. The gatekeeper era is over. Tomorrow, Alexandra Eala steps onto that court to face Karolína Muchová in the final of the Miami Open, and she does so carrying something that no ranking, no seeding, and no institutional approval can manufacture or buy. She carries an entire nation on her back, and she does not feel the weight. She carries the training philosophy of the most mentally indomitable tennis player who ever lived. She carries the fury of every athlete who was told they did not belong, and the clarity of someone who decided, without hesitation, that none of those voices mattered. She carries the topspin of a generation. Muchova will arrive as the establishment's chosen protector. Eala will arrive as a force of nature that the establishment cannot contain. The Miami Trophy has never meant more than it will mean tomorrow, not for the establishment, not for the sport, and not for the 115 million people who will be watching, praying, and screaming their voices raw as one of their own walks to the baseline, bounces the ball 4 times, and fires the first serve of the most important match of her young, extraordinary, unstoppable life. The revolution did not arrive quietly. It did not ask for permission. It did not wait for the establishment to open the door. It took the door off the hinges entirely, and tomorrow, the coronation is complete. Alexandra Eala is not the future of women's tennis. She is the present. She is the moment. She is the storm that has already arrived, and no one, not Muchova, not the executives, not the sponsors, and not the entire weight of the old tennis world can stop what is already in motion. The crown is being claimed, and you are watching it happen in real time.